Have you ever felt that your life was out of control? Growing up near the airport in Stuttgart, Germany, I often watched planes taking off and landing and wondered what it would be like to be up there in the sky. As a little boy, I wished I could fly myself just like an eagle. And then I started to dream about being in a plane. And eventually, somehow I knew that eventually I would even be a pilot. The high cost of flying in Germany kept me from flying when I was young. But the dream was always there. Then in my early 30s, when I lived in Southern California, my friend Paul became a flight instructor. Finally, I had the opportunity I was waiting for. My dream of getting a pilot's license was within reach. After a few hours of flight training with my instructor, I took off for my first solo flight in that little two-seater Cessna 150. I was going, yes, I can take off and land a plane all by myself, without anybody else in the cockpit, getting me one step closer to becoming a pilot. Then a few days later, I took off for my third solo flight. As I prepared to practice how to recover from a stall at 2,500 feet, I looked all around to make sure there were no other aircraft near me. I had practiced this maneuver many times before with my instructor, but this time I had to practice stall recovery for the first time all by myself. "You got this," said my flight instructor, but I was still very nervous. The sweat in my palms made the grip on the controls quite slippery. So wiping off the sweat on my pants, I started the procedure. As I was pulling up the nose, the plane slowed down close to stall speed. I expected the nose to drop any moment because the plane started to feel very unstable and my heart started to race. So I expected the nose to drop, but it didn't. Suddenly, the left wing dropped before the right wing, and I got myself into a graveyard spiral. My heart sank. I was horrified, thinking that these would be the last few seconds of my life. The earth was turning like a disc in front of me, and the instruments showed the rapid descent. My thoughts went to my mother and my father. I was so afraid that they would have to stand at the grave of yet another son. I knew my mother would be devastated. How could I do this to her? I should have known better. She already lost 2 cousins in separate air crashes. I felt more helpless than ever before. Was there anything I could do? Nothing. I tried with the controls slow down the race towards the ground. I needed a miracle to get me out of this graveyard spiral. After dropping 1,000 feet out of the sky, I let go of all the controls and said, "God, take this plane." In an instant, the plane straightened out with only 1,500 feet left above the ground. Had I held on to the controls just a few more seconds, I would have crashed that plane. Thank God I survived. Letting go literally saved my life. My heart still racing, but with a huge sense of relief, I pushed in the throttle to gain altitude and flew back to the airport. I wanted to put that plane on solid ground as fast as I could. Soft landing or hard landing, I didn't care. I just wanted to survive. Back at the airport, my flight instructor freaked out when I, his very first flight student, told him what just happened a few miles away. Talking with my flight instructor about next steps, I told him, I'm scared to fly solo again. Being scared, facing fears, happened to me over and over again in my life, especially when I try to stretch myself, expand myself, try new things like flying, and live life to the fullest. But whenever I was scared, doubt started to creep in. For example, in this situation, is it worth the risk? Shouldn't I play it safe? Why take another chance? Just be glad you survived. Then I remembered a lesson that my father taught me when my aunt got into an accident, totaling her car. My father took her to a car dealership the very next day. He did not want her fear to build up so much that it would keep her from ever driving again. With that lesson in mind, I realized that I could not allow my fear to grow so strong that it would keep me from getting back into the cockpit. Otherwise, I couldn't have continued with my childhood dream. So after about 3 hours after landing the plane, my hands and my knees stopped shaking, and I got back into the cockpit again. Had to muster all my courage to get back there behind the wheel. Alone, again. No stall practice this time, just simple 3 takeoffs and landings. That was enough. You may think, that was crazy. For me, it was about not giving in to my fears and doubts, but believing that I would be safe and that I could continue to pursue my childhood dream. But even more than that, if I gave up, it would have eroded my confidence. About 10 years later, in Tennessee, a woman at work had a lot of worries about her niece's future, who seemed to be going down a bad path. But it was completely out of the woman's control. After telling her my story, she said, "You just ministered to me." That was her way of saying, "You just provided comfort to me emotionally and spiritually." I wondered how. She replied, "You just made me realize that I need to let go of the worry about my niece." And I'm so relieved. That made me think, what else is there in my own life that I still need to let go? And what keeps me from letting go? Asking myself those questions started a process of weeding out those things that held me back. I imagined what I would feel like if I let go of whatever else has kept me from pursuing other dreams. Even so I did this. I did all the weeding out, and I did try to get rid of everything else. I still continued, even as I got older, I still continued to have worries throughout my life. For example, a worry that came up for me almost 30 years after my incident, when I was fired at the age of 59. I had to start my own business. There wasn't enough money in my retirement account to just retire. And with a mortgage and our 2 sons, David and Daniel, still in college, I had a lot of worries around money. It was different for my lovely wife. Emily was not worried at all. I knew her faith was strong, but I didn't fully understand how I could get to a point where I was not worried anymore. I heard people say, "Just let go of worry," like, "No worries, mate," right? But how? Thankfully, I had a coach this time who taught me a 3-step process. This helped me not only to courageously face my fears and worries, but to ultimately overcome them. Here are the 3 steps. Step number 1, letting go of the underlying belief. When we feel an oppressive, energy-draining emotion, such as a fear or worry, we identify the underlying belief behind that emotion. So, what was my belief that I had behind the fear around money? And what was my wife's belief? Why was she not worried? My belief was, we may not have enough. Her belief was, we will always have enough. Looking back at our lives, I realized my belief was not true. My wife was right, we've always had enough. Letting go of my limiting false belief that we may not have enough allowed me to embrace my wife's true belief that we will always have enough. Step number 2, ask empowering questions. Based on the true belief that we will always have enough, we asked ourselves empowering questions, such as, what can we do to generate income? What business could we start? What skills do we have that we could build on? What other resources do we have in terms of time, money, or talents? Asking ourselves those empowering questions helps the emotional part of the brain to calm down. And it allows the rational, creative part of the brain to engage. The brain then generates positive thoughts and creative ideas. And the positive thoughts and creative ideas lead to positive emotions. And the positive emotional energy then allows us to take step number 3, positive action. We can now act on the creative ideas we have generated. In our example, we started a business that provided the income we needed, reinforcing the belief that we will always have enough. I enjoyed that process so much that I'm now helping others to let go of what's holding them back and then take positive action to get them where they want to go. It also inspired me to write my book covering many issues that others have shared with me over the years. What we learned is that a negative emotion may be just an indicator, a signal that there's a false or limiting belief behind it. So what we let go is not just the emotion, the negative emotion, but the false or limiting belief that causes the emotion. Aaron Beck, who is considered the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, already wrote about the research that he had done on this topic in his 1976 publication, Cognitive Distortions. Letting go of the controls in the cockpit saved my life. Letting go of my limiting belief saved my dream. Now I want you to write down an oppressive, energy-draining emotion, such as a fear or a pain, and identify the underlying belief behind it. The belief that you've been carrying around for too long. The belief that has held you back. The belief that you want to let go. I imagine a time when we are no longer controlled by our fears and worries, but inspired by what's possible when we let go. Today is your time to let go so you can be free and safely land your dream.